are we being controlled? It's a big question. And I'm going to say, yes, we are. But it's not how you think. So it's not secret sound waves coming through the radio and through your computer or television that control your own brainwaves. And it's not subliminal advertising, undertones in the ads we see that lead our mind to think about a certain thing or think a certain way. It's not even nanobots that were introduced to our bodies through the COVID vaccine. The way we're controlled is by teaching us history. What you believe to be your history is what controls you. It's what gives you your understanding of understanding. The understanding with which you understand the world. And this history comes to you wrapped up in a language that has something to do with it as well. So, here are some myth stories from around the world. So, in North America, I've talked to people who gave me the story that one day, a long, long time ago, not necessarily in the beginning, but something like it, the whole world was a world of water. Just water, ocean, as far as you can see, as far as you could travel, all you would find was ocean. But then, one day, something came out swimming into that ocean. And what was it? It was a turtle. And when this turtle started swimming around, other things started swimming around too and came to join it. A duck, muskrat, other things. It depends on who you talk to as to what animals were there. And what came about was the decision by these animals that, this turtle ought to have some mud put on its back. Maybe we could really make something of this, They knew there was mud down at the bottom of all that water. And so one by one, these animals dove down as best they could, swam as deeply as they could under all that water in the hopes of getting some mud to bring back up. And one by one they failed until one of the animals, a muskrat, we'll say for this story, dove so deep and got to the point where it knew it had to turn around and swim back up or it might die, but it kept going. And when all the other animals around the giant turtle thought this animal died, all of a sudden it came floating up and bobbed unconsciously. Within moments, that muskrat came to, and when it looked in one of its paws, it saw it had, in fact, gained some mud. It took that mud, it put it on the back of the giant turtle. And from that mud grew the world on which we live. So our anthropologists call that a myth story. It's a Native American story that some people believed to explain how the world came to be. Now, interestingly, check out this story from New Zealand. In a time when all the world was ocean, there was a being named Maui. And Maui was a great fisherman. And Maui fished from his boat, fished and fished. And one day, thought he got a snag. He thought, I must have hooked my lure on a rock down there or something. 'Cause, man, this thing's stuck. But then Maui thought, wait, actually, it's coming towards me, just slowly. I am reeling this up. And he reeled and he reeled and he reeled. And it took many days, took even many years to reel up what was snagged there. Finally, it breached the surface. And what Maui had brought up was a giant turtle. And the turtle stayed on the surface. And on the back of this turtle was made the world that we call New Zealand. So that's another myth story. Now, wrap your head around this, though. Now, interesting, I know that they're two stories from very different parts of the world, and yet they're so similar. This video is not about delving into that, but I really think you should. But what I want you to wrap your head around is that people who believed this story for all those years before colonization, they didn't call that a myth story like our anthropologists and ethnographers would call. They called it history. So here you are believing in your history as if these are real events, that you evolved from an ape that became hunter-gatherer, started farming eventually, and became modern Homo sapiens, living in cities. Another thing that our history tells us is that our culture is the great savior of the world, because we spread the Roman culture and advanced technology on every continent, and this benefited everyone. That's another belief from our history that many tune into. So, why do these beliefs control us? How does that happen? Turns out that how we view and experience both the outer and inner world is built upon a foundation of how we believe things came to be as they are. Interesting, right? So, this is your understanding of understanding, with which you apply to your identity and the entire world. And it's based on the foundation of history, on what language brings to your worldview, in which this history is delivered, and what's happened because of this foundation being there is that archaeology and geology as studies are also seen through the beliefs of history, and therefore we can only as a collective believe new findings that fit in with what we know of history. Because our history is a very powerful force on us. So powerful, it causes us to reject evidence that speaks contrary to what we know our history to be. And the crazy thing about this, why that happens, is that in order to protect and preserve the core beliefs around which you made your identity, you have to believe history happened as it did, because the whole framework of who you are and your purpose in this world was built on this information. And you've become selective in order to preserve yourself. So this may sound crazy, but I think I can give you an example of something that happens in all our lives that can prove that we are capable of this. So it's this idea of seeing others that we interact with on a daily basis. So think of the people you're around. Personally, I remember as a construction worker at a laboratory, I remember talking to an IT worker and realizing this is a person I haven't really seen. Like, I've walked by them. I know they exist here, that some of the work I do in construction is for the IT department, but you know, the people in construction usually just make fun of the IT workers. You know, make jabs about how they're Star Wars loving, force following, computer brained people. And I'm sure the IT department people poke little jabs about the construction workers that, you know, obviously we don't know very much about their world, and we've been left behind because we don't like computers. Whatever. But the thing is, if you're honest in your life, ask yourself how many people you come into contact every day that you don't really see. Because our head is full of the things that we see that benefit us. I'll go back to this. I'm a construction worker, so I see the other construction workers. I'm very aware of all of them and what they're doing and what's going on in their minds. But if I haven't opened myself up, I haven't thought about the physicists I work around, the engineers, the technicians, and when I started actually living with all these people. Now, I'd been around them up to this point, but because they weren't on my mental radar, they were not consequential to my daily living, I didn't really see them. That's why when people say to each other in very endearing terms, I see you in there, it's very powerful, because we go our days not really seen by the people around us. So, why do I say this? On the topic of our history actually being a myth story and how it does control us. Your understanding of what understanding is tells you what to see in this world. It funnels down and cancels out certain realities and chooses a reality for you to focus on. So let's look at the history of our history. And you can't avoid religious beliefs when you do so. So, beginning of the times of the Romans, really starting to build, it was a world of many gods. Just like the Greek gods, there were a great number of Roman gods. And they were to be feared. And if you were good to them, they would be good to you. And that, for all intents and purposes, really helped the Romans to use fear and interpret their own interpretations of the gods to help people in how to live their daily lives. But one day, it was getting to be a pain managing having all these gods. And in the Roman world, it was decided that there was actually only one God. Instead of all these multiple gods, just a single God religion came about at some point. And it was much easier to rule the people this way. So when you have a belief that your world was created by a god, multiple gods, and that you live in their world, it's going to allow or disallow a certain set of behaviors that can come from you. Now, at some point, religion gave way to reason. We're still living in the time where this is happening. And it's happened in some places, not in other places. But as science came about, interesting things happened. So, electricity. When it was discovered that humans could harness electricity, and this was actually what lightning was made of, did that ever disturb the ranks of the religious beliefs that lightning was God-made, that it was a force of God? No other way to explain it. But now we're powering up light bulbs with batteries, and we're harnessing lightning. Heads rolled. That was a very tough time. So, the other thing, I've met people who say, well, dinosaurs just never existed. They don't exist. They don't make any sense. Religious people still saying this, which, hey, that's cool. That's their opinion. Because the acceptance of dinosaurs throws into jeopardy the whole belief that got you praying every day, that explained the world to you. Because, no. The book says nothing about these. And your geology says this was a time long before God created the world. So, no. That ain't right. But it's always changed through history. The idea of history, the myth story being believed, has been through constant flux. So why does it become what it is? Well, history is always written by the victors. Right? And it needed to be written a certain way because psychologically, humans need to believe that they are doing good in the world. And if they don't, their psyche breaks and they can turn to addiction and lawlessness. Does this sound familiar? There's a lot of people right now going through inner turmoil, believing or not believing in their history, their myth story, or maybe they've rejected it and they have nothing in its place, and that's causing inner turmoil. I think most likely it's that the version they've been given of their history is not compatible with how they feel and what they know to be true. So our myth story, our history, rejects archaeology that can redefine the human story. There's been a lot of things found that the human community en masse has rejected, just like UFOs for so long, and even still. But when we keep finding older and older signs of advanced civilization, artifacts too old to be true, craftily made as if using modern machining techniques, and yet these things are sometimes up to 1 million years old. When we find these things, we can't accept them. They don't fit within our history. If we were to accept them, we would have to accept that maybe the identity we've made our entire lives and the beliefs that kept us going and working, that they might not be true. And that's why it's hard to actually uptake this evidence and build it and incorporate it into our view of history. But if we could, I think our human story might look something like this. At some point, the world was engulfed in flame and flood, or one or the other, and hardly anything was left. Forests were gone, for the most part. Nothing made a sound, no animals to peep, for the most part. And there were a handful of human survivors. These human survivors slowly forgot or didn't know what happened before that catastrophe, but they knew how to survive in the world and to be very creative. And so they built themselves up. And as the world became healthy again and produced more energy, they could take in more energy and become more and more complex socially. This would go on until something on every different continent this would happen, until an event happened called globalization, where people weren't limited to their own continent, but rather they could travel between all continents, and a great mixing would happen. And instead of genetics as in, of one nation with one color skin, as happened on the different continents, now everyone mixes. The colors all mix. The genetics of the immune systems mix. Ideas mix. And there's a global community and a global cycle of births, deaths, of natural selection, and then something happens. Another planetary catastrophe. Be it a comet crashes into the Earth, be it volcanoes that open up and make the skies black for decades. Something happens, and then humans find themselves scattered in dwindled numbers on the different continents. Eventually, they find that they've forgotten what happened before they were. And what they do is they do what humans do. They survive. They live. And on each continent, people selectively become one color. And then once again, globalization. Repeat. So this is honestly, if you take together all the evidence, this is the most likely story to be believed, the most honest myth story that the universe has offered to us. So if you did believe this, how would it change your life? Well, for me, the idea that our biggest task as a species is to spread, become global, harden up the genetic pool, which has been definitely hardened from the last catastrophe, spread it around, harden it up yet, become a better version of ourselves biologically, has been accomplished. We've done it. We're mixing the genes. We're preparing humans, probably in the best way we can as a community, for the next great catastrophe. See, if I were to believe this, like I say, I can relax. It's done. Now, I can live on a different wavelength of understanding. Rather than seeing this existence as just the only time humans have progressed this way, and it's part of my responsibility to keep progression happening and keep technology evolving, that's what's important. No. That's normal. That's happened time and time again over who knows how many years. And the fact that all the bones in anthropological history used to identify the human path from ape to the modern human fits inside a pretty small box, like smaller than a regular sized coffin. Yet we've extrapolated so much information about human history and progress from this little bit of evidence is a farce. But it fits in nicely with the current myth story, doesn't it? It proves it. Yet there's a larger body of evidence proves the contrary, but it can't be seen. Our understanding of understanding doesn't let us take that information in. But if I could, I think I'd feel just a little more free. Because a story you believe, it's its effects on your inner world that are very important. And the story you believe, how things came to be, is either going to open inner gateways or create inner cages and create inner boundaries to areas that you have a right to be. And that's how we're being controlled. It's our history. It's the myth story that gives us an anchor from which to work with our beliefs of the world. And it's your history that gives you an understanding of your understanding. And it objectifies your perception and tells you what to pick up on in this world, what to see, sense, and what is not important. Now, imagine if you could see more of the world around you. Things that you were told don't exist, so they're not even on your radar of existence. They're out there. You're just not perceiving them. Imagine if you could perceive more of these things. See more of the actual world. Because if we can see more of our inner world. That place of the most important aspects of exploration. So think about it. What's your history? How does it condition you? How true do you think it is? What the heck is truth? Because the only truth I see is that we need to make up a story of how things came to be the way they are so that we can confidently go towards how things are going to be and how they are in our daily life, how we have a relationship in our daily life with life. All right, I'm going to stop right there. Thanks for listening. I hope this provoked some thoughts about things we take for granted and things maybe we shouldn't, like our ability to expand in the inner world and therefore experience more of this outer world. Because, let me tell you, it's a thrill. It's a thrill to me. Again, thanks for listening. I hope this was useful to you, as that is what I want to accomplish. Take care.